everyone, Piscean here. In this video, we're going to talk about the zodiac sign Cancer, doing a deep dive. And I have Cancer natally in my 3rd house. Comment below if you know where Cancer is at in your chart. Please like, subscribe, comment, share if you dare, and care with peace and love. Before we also get started, this video is coming to you with the help of Perplexity AI Agent, bringing you this content today. So, as we see here, Cancer is cardinal water. Of course, it's both lunar memory and the architecture of belonging. And here is the big wheel it's on. We're going to go over the core thesis to start out here. So see, Cancer is not softness. Cancer is protective intelligence. It is cardinal water, the element of emotion, intuition, and the unconscious, expressed through the modality of initiation. Cancer does not merely feel, it moves by feeling. It is the first water sign of the zodiac, the point where the journey of selfhood turns inward, where the external world is no longer the primary territory, and the inner world becomes the landscape of action. If Aries initiates through action, we see that Taurus is through building, and Gemini through communication. So Cancer initiates through emotional orientation. It asks, what matters? What do I care about enough to protect? What is worth remembering, worth holding, worth creating a sanctuary for? This is not passivity. This is the strategic intelligence of the body, the intelligence that knows before thought catches up what is safe and what is not. So Cancer teaches that sensitivity is not weakness, it is a navigation system. Right here, we see that Cancer does not merely feel, it moves by feeling, with that cardinal initiation and that water emotion. So here's a technical profile with the essential astrological data we need. We see the element is, of course, water, emotion, intuition, the unconscious depth, with the modality being cardinal, initiates, begins, sets in motion. Polarity being feminine, negative, receptive, inward, consolidating. When we say feminine, negative, we mean it's negative in the sense that, in my opinion, and most people's opinions, men are physically stronger than women. Men are just more apt to doing certain things, and we as women are more submissive and receptive in our nature. And we have to be able to, also defend ourselves. It's like a prey-predator thing, to be honest with you. Ruler, we have the moon, the only sign ruled by a luminary besides Leo. Domicile is moon in Cancer, essential dignity at its peak, exalted in Jupiter, 15 degrees exactly, falls in Mars, direct action frustrated, detriment to Saturn, structure meets emotional porosity, temperament is cold and wet, phlegmatic, receptive, absorbing, connective. House affinity is the 4th house of root, home, ancestry, private foundation. The season, summer solstice, the longest day, the peak of light. And in the tarot is the chariot, victory through emotional mastery. Now we see planetary dignity scorecard here. The planetary dignity in Cancer. Of course, there's moon, domicile at home in its full power. And then Jupiter, it's exalted, 15 degrees. Mars, it falls, diminished. And at Saturn, it's detriment. It's challenged. So the moon is at home in Cancer. This is the domicile, the sign where it operates at maximum power. We see Jupiter is exalted here, 15 degrees, the precise degree that serves as the ascendant of the Thema Mundi, the mythical birth chart of the cosmos. Mars falls in Cancer because its direct assertive nature is softened and redirected by Cancer's emotional medium. Saturn is in detriment because its cold, boundary-enforcing nature is fundamentally at odds with Cancer's warm, porous, emotional, connective quality. Cancer and the zodiacal story. So after Gemini, language becomes memory. Gemini is the breath, okay? The exchange of information, the constant movement of data through the air. But breath must eventually settle. The conversation must end, and what remains after the words stop? Feeling, memory, the sense of what those words meant, not just what they said. That is Cancer's territory. Cancer is what happens when the intellect descends into the waters of the unconscious and becomes emotional knowing. In the Cancer-Capricorn axis, every sign is defined partly by its opposite. Cancer's opposite is Capricorn. Together they form the axes of private and public, root and summit, origin and destination. Cancer is the root system hidden underground, nourishing the tree from beneath. And we see that Capricorn is the mountain, visible and structural, reaching toward the sky, So Cancer asks, where do I come from? And Capricorn asks, where am I going? And the tension between them is the tension between belonging and achievement, between the private self and the public legacy. And this right here shows us a nice graph of the ascent, descent, and we see over here that this is what Capricorn's going with: the structure, legacy, peak, achievement, and public publicity. That's Capricorn. And then we see Cancer here, which is your roots, origins, private belonging, and memory on that descent. So now onto the squares. Aries and Libra. Cancer squares Aries and Libra, the other cardinal signs. The square to Aries is the tension between emotional self-protection and direct action, because Aries charges forward and Cancer circles sideways. And the square to Libra is the tension between private feeling and public harmony. Libra negotiates the social surface while Cancer operates in the emotional depths. And both squares are creative. They generate the friction that makes Cancer's protective intelligence necessary. Alright, onto the lunar engine. Cancer is ruled by the moon, and this is not a minor detail. The moon is the fastest moving body in astrology. It changes changes signs every 2.5 days, and it cycles through all 8 phases every 29.5 days. It is the planet most directly tied to the physical body, to rhythms, to cycles, to the tides of feeling that rise and fall within us. And in Cancer, the moon is at home. This is a domicile, a sign where its nature is most fully expressed, most completely itself. And this means Cancer energy is inherently cyclical. It is not linear. It does not move in a straight line from A to B. It moves in waves and tides and phases. There are times of fullness and times of emptiness, times when everything is visible and times when everything is dark. The Cancer native who understands this learns to work with her cycles rather than against them. The one who doesn't spends their life wondering why they feel everything so intensely one week and nothing the next. And right here we see 8 lunar phases mirror the Cancer emotional cycle, from the darkness of the new moon, the inward turn, the reset, through the waxing crescent, the first stirring of feeling, the first quarter, the crisis of commitment, the waxing gibbous, the approach to fullness, the full moon, the peak of emotional intensity, the waning gibbous, the sharing of what was learned, the last quarter, the release, and the waning crescent, the surrender and rest, which we see right here in this lunar cycle. Alright, onto this dignity deep dive. Moon in domicile, the lunar home field. So, when the moon is in Cancer, it is in its domicile, its home territory. This is where the moon's nature is most fully resourced. The moon represents the emotional body, the instincts, the needs, the memory, the habits, the body's rhythms. And moon in Cancer is all of these amplified, clarified, given a home base. A person with the moon in Cancer has emotional intelligence that operates at a very high frequency. They feel what others feel. They sense the mood of a room before anyone speaks. They remember emotional experiences with photographic precision. The challenge of the moon in domicile is that the emotional signal is so strong it can be overwhelming. The moon in Cancer native may struggle to distinguish their own feelings from the feelings of those around them. The emotional porosity that is their gift is also their vulnerability. The work is not to shut down the sensitivity, it is to develop the shell that protects without isolating. Jupiter exalted at 15 degrees Cancer, and this is one of the most significant exaltations in astrology. Jupiter is a planet of expansion, generosity, faith, and meaning. In Cancer, it finds its highest expression through protective generosity, the kind of abundance that creates sanctuary for others. Jupiter in Cancer is a parent who makes sure everyone is fed, the host who turns their home into a refugee, the leader whose faith is rooted in care. The 15th degree of Cancer is also the ascendant degree of the Thema Mundi, the mythical birth chart of the cosmos. This means Jupiter's exaltation degree is the exact point where the world itself is said to have begun. The symbolism is profound. The cosmos begins in Cancer, at the degree where Jupiter, the principle of meaning, growth, and beneficence, reaches its highest dignity. Alright, Mars in fall in Cancer. This does not mean Mars is weak here, it means Mars is uncomfortable. Okay, so Mars wants to charge directly, to confront, to assert through visible action, and Cancer's emotional medium redirects that energy. So Mars in Cancer does not attack head-on, it circles, it protects, it fights sideways, through emotional influence, through strategic withdrawal, through the weaponization of care. This is a source of Cancer's reputation for passive aggression and indirect conflict. The Mars energy is real, it is assertive, it is combative, it is driven, but it cannot express itself directly through Cancer's water, so it comes out sideways, through the guilt trip, the silent treatment, the withdrawal of warmth. The evolved Mars in Cancer learns to name what it is angry about, rather than encoding the anger in emotional maneuvers. The unevolved one spends years fighting battles no one else can see. Alright, let's talk about Saturn and detriment. I have this placement. Oops. So Saturn and detriment. Of course, that's Saturn in Cancer. It's the root of Cancer's boundary challenges. Saturn is the planet of structure, limitation, and the enforcement of edges, and Cancer is a sign of emotional porosity, of merging, of the dissolving of boundaries between self and other. The detriment means Saturn's boundary enforcing nature is fundamentally at odds with Cancer's connective absorbing quality. That's why Cancer natives often struggle with boundaries, not because they don't understand them intellectually, but because the sign itself resists the hard edge. The work for Saturn in Cancer, or for any strong Cancer placement, is to build boundaries that are flexible rather than rigid, boundaries that protect without isolating, that filter without cutting off. The crab's shell is a perfect metaphor, okay? So there's a boundary that allows the crab to move, to feel, to interact, but that can also be retreated into when the world becomes too much. The 3 deacons. Each sign spans 30 degrees, each 10-degree segment, each decan has its own sub-ruler that adds a specific flavor to the sign's expression. For Cancer, we use the traditional Chaldean decan system, which assigns sub-rulers in descending Chaldean order from the sign's domicile ruler. Okay, so first we see from 0 degrees to 10 degrees, it's Venus, tenderness, shelter, and affection. 10 degrees through 20 degrees, Mercury, memory, story, and language. And 3rd decan, 20 degrees through 30 degrees, Moon, lunar force, psychic, and depth. So 10 degrees Cancer is ruled by Venus, 0 degrees through 10 degrees Cancer is the 1st decan. So Venus brings tenderness, affection, and a deep need for beauty to the Cancer emotional depth. And this is the most relational Cancer, the one whose protective instinct is channeled through love, through the creation of beautiful, comfortable spaces, through the nurturing of aesthetic sensitivity. The Venus ruled 1st decan is the Cancer who cares through touch, through food, through the arrangement of a home that feels like a sanctuary. Their challenge is that Venus in Cancer can become possessive love, the kind that holds too tightly, that confuses protection with control. 2nd decan, ruled by Mercury, bringing language, memory, and communicative intelligence to the Cancer waters. This is the most verbal Cancer, the one who can articulate what they feel, who processes emotion through writing and storytelling, who remembers the past in vivid detail. The Mercury ruled 2nd decan is that a Cancer who keeps journals, who tells family stories, who preserves the narratives of their lineage. Their gift is emotional literacy, the ability to name what is happening in the inner world. Their challenge is that Mercury in Cancer can become rumination, the same story told over and over, the memory that cannot be released, the narrative that becomes a prison. And the 3rd decan of Cancer, ruled by the Moon, and this is the purest, most intensely lunar Cancer. Cancer, the deep oceanic tide, psychic receptivity, dream life that is as real as waking. The Moon ruled 3rd decan is the most inward, most intuitive, most difficult to know from the outside. They operate on emotional frequencies that others can barely perceive. They are the dreamers, psychics, keepers of the deepest tides. Their challenge is that the Moon, in its own decan, can become overwhelming. The emotional signal is so strong it can drown out everything else. The work is to find the anchor that allows them to stay in the world without losing contact with the depths. Alrighty, on to classical temperament. Cold and wet. So in the classical system of medical astrology, each sign has a temperament based on the 4 qualities, and that's hot, cold, wet, and dry. We see Cancer is cold and wet, phlegmatic. Cold means receptive, inward turning, consolidating, and wet means connective, blending, dissolving. And together, these qualities describe a temperament that absorbs, that takes in, that becomes one with its environment. The phlegmatic temperament is associated with the body's fluids, lymph, mucus, watery systems that lubricate and protect. It is a temperament of patience, accumulation, slow but powerful momentum. The phlegmatic individual is not quick to react, but once they are in motion, their momentum is difficult to stop. This is the Cancer pattern. The slow build of emotional energy, the long patience, and then the tidal surge that moves everything at once. So Cancer sits in the cold, wet quadrant alongside Scorpio and Pisces, the other water signs, but Cancer is specifically the cardinal expression of this temperament, the one that initiates through the phlegmatic qualities rather than fixing or adapting them. So we see cold, hot, and dry, and then we have your wet and dry on top. So like hot and wet, cold and wet, cold, dry. Even have a little bit dry here. But essentially we have choleric, which is hot and dry, sanguine, which is hot and wet, melancholic, which is cold and dry, and phlegmatic, which is cold and wet. Alright, when we talk about melancholic, I'd say that's more like a Saturn, Capricorn, or Aquarius. Sanguine, that's more like a Pisces. And hot and dry, I'd say that's more like an Aries. Alright, onto the shell architecture. So the crab shell is a perfect anatomical metaphor for Cancer's psychological structure. It is not a wall, it is a layered defense system with a threshold, an inner chamber, and a core. Understanding this architecture is essential to understanding how Cancer operates in the world. The outer shell is armor, protection, the face shown to the world, while the threshold is a boundary between self and other, where trust is tested. The inner chamber is private self, family, memory, a sanctuary, and the pearl core is a vulnerable self, what is guarded at all costs. Okay? This is about those 4 layers. So the outer shell is what the world sees the face Cancer presents, which may be hard, funny, competent, or unassuming, but is always a construction. And the threshold is a boundary zone, the place where trust is tested, where the other must prove they are safe before they are allowed further in. The inner chamber is a private self, the family, memories, feelings that are not shared with the world. And the pearl, the core, is a vulnerable self, the thing that is guarded at all costs, the emotional truth that Cancer spends its life protecting. The shadow of this architecture is that the shell can become a prison, the threshold can become so narrow that no one gets in, the inner chamber can become so comfortable that the Cancer never leaves, the pearl can become so guarded that even the Cancer themselves loses contact with it. The work is not to dismantle the shell, it is to build a door that can be opened deliberately from the inside by choice. Shadow work, the dark moon. So every sign's gift has a shadow, the same energy expressed unconsciously without awareness. For Cancer, the shadow is what happens when protective intelligence operates without consciousness. The nurturing becomes control. Okay? The sensitivity becomes manipulation. The memory becomes a prison. And then we have nurture, protection, control, and withdrawal. Let's talk about it. So emotional manipulation. Cancer's gift is emotional intelligence, the ability to read, influence, and shape the emotional field. The shadow is when that intelligence becomes manipulation, the guilt trip. The emotional withdrawal used as punishment, the weaponization of care. After everything I've done for you is the Cancer shadow in its purest form, love that comes with an invisible ledger. Smothering Cancer's protective instinct is real and valuable. The shadow is smothering, protection that does not allow the other person to grow, to risk, to fail. The Cancer parent who won't let their child make mistakes. The Cancer partner who manages every detail of their loved one's life. The line between care and control is a central ethical question of Cancer's shadow work. Nostalgia is prison. Cancer's gift is memory, okay? The ability to hold the past, to preserve what was, to keep the stories alive. The shadow is when memory becomes a prison. The nostalgia that prevents engagement with the present, the loyalty to a past version of a relationship that no longer exists, the inability to let go of what was because the feeling of loss is too much to bear. The shell is isolation. Cancer's gift is a shell, the ability to retreat, to protect, to create a safe inner space, and the shadow is when that shell becomes isolation. The withdrawal that becomes permanent, the defenses that become walls, the sensitivity that becomes a reason to never risk connection. The crab that never comes out of its shell does not live, it merely survives. So getting comfortable being uncomfortable. The Thema Mundi, Cancer is the beginning. So in Hellenistic astrology, the Thema Mundi, the theme of the world, is the mythical birth chart of the cosmos, used as a teaching device to explain the logic of planetary rulerships, and in this foundational chart, it is not Aries that rises, it is Cancer. The Thema Mundi places Cancer on the ascendant, with the moon in Cancer at 15 degrees, which is the exact degree of Jupiter's exaltation. Sun is in Leo, Mercury is in Virgo, Venus is in Libra, Mars is in Scorpio, Jupiter is in Sagittarius, and Saturn is in Capricorn. Each planet is in its domicile at 15 degrees. The chart is a night chart. The sun is below the horizon. The implications are profound. If the cosmos itself begins in Cancer, then the first fact of existence is not action, Aries, or stability, Taurus, or communication, Gemini. It is being held. The first principle is the mother. The origin is the womb. The Thema Mundi tells us that before anything else there was shelter. And here is the Thema Mundi, the Cancer rising, moon conjunct descendant at 15 degrees, with each planet in its domicile at 15 degrees. The midheaven falls in Aries. The world's action is driven by Martian impulse, but its origin is lunar. Alright, so now the gate of men. In ancient cosmology, Cancer was known as the gate of men, the portal through which souls descended from the heavens into incarnation. The opposite sign, Capricorn, was the gate of gods, the portal through which souls ascended back to the divine. This doctrine, referenced by the Neoplatonist Porphyry in his commentary on Homer's Cave of the Nymphs, connects Cancer to the summer solstice, the northernmost point of the sun's journey, the peak of light, the moment of descent. And this is not generic astrology, this is a specific esoteric doctrine that places Cancer at the cosmological threshold between the spiritual and the material. The crab, which moves sideways between the land and the sea, is the perfect symbol for this liminal position, the creature that exists at the boundary between two worlds. Talk about the fixed stars of the Cancer constellation. So the zodiac sign of Cancer and the constellation of Cancer are not the same thing. Due to the precession of the equinoxes, the stars of the Cancer constellation have shifted into the tropical sign of Leo. However, these stars still carry the archetypal signature of the crab and are used by astrologers who work with fixed stars. So we see here fixed stars of the Cancer constellation with tropical longitudes, precessed from constellation to the zodiac sign. Now, the most significant feature of the Cancer constellation is not a single star, but a cluster. Praesepe, or M44, the beehive cluster, known in Latin as the manger or the crib. In traditional astrology, Praesepe carries a Mars-Moon nature, combining assertion with emotional depth. It sits at approximately 7 degrees tropical Leo, and was traditionally associated with hidden dangers, blindness, and the kind of intensity that comes from the unconscious. Flanking Praesepe are the Acilus borealis and Acilus australis, the northern and southern donkeys, at approximately 8 degrees and 9 degrees tropical Leo. These stars carry a Mars-Sun nature and were associated with stubbornness, endurance, and the willingness to carry heavy loads. Agubens, the alpha star of Cancer, sits at approximately 14 degrees tropical Leo and carries a Saturn-Mercury nature, the combination of structure and intellect applied to emotional material. In advanced applications, Cancer placements in the natal chart. So Cancer's sun is core identity, organized around emotional truth, belonging, and the protection of what matters. The life path involves learning to lead with sensitivity rather than despite it. The challenge is not becoming hard, it is remaining soft in a world that rewards hardness. Cancer moon, the emotional body is at home, feelings are deep, cyclical, and powerful. Memory is vivid, especially emotional memory. The instinct is to nurture, to feed, to create comfort. The challenge is emotional boundaries, learning where you end and another begins. Cancer rising, the approach to the world is protective, indirect, and emotionally tuned. The first impression is often warm but guarded. The shell is visible from the start. The life path involves learning to open a shell by choice rather than by accident. The chart ruler is the moon, which means the moon's position by sign, house, and aspect describes the core life narrative. Cancer Venus love is expressed through care, through nurturing, through the creation of shared spaces. The Venus in Cancer native loves by feeding, by sheltering, by remembering what you like. The shadow is possessiveness, love that holds too tightly, that confuses protection with ownership. Cancer Mars, the warrior fights sideways. Assertion comes through emotional channels rather than direct confrontation. Mars in Cancer native protects fiercely but may struggle to express anger cleanly. The work is to learn directness, to say what is wrong rather than encoding it in withdrawal. Alright, and Cancer Saturn. Boundary work is the life work. Saturn in Cancer is learning to build structures that protect without isolating, to create containers that hold emotion without repressing it. This is often the placement of someone whose early environment did not provide adequate safety, and whose life task is to build that safety for themselves and others. So this is very karmic. Saturn in Cancer is a very karmic position. Cancer transits when planets enter the shell. When planets transit Cancer, they activate the Cancer theme in everyone's chart. So Cancer themes are home, family, emotional safety, memory, and belonging. So we see a Mars transit through Cancer brings emotional conflict to the surface. while a Venus transit brings a desire to beautify the home and nurture relationships, while a Jupiter transit brings expansion to family life and emotional generosity. Saturn transit brings boundary work, structural challenges to the home, and confrontation with what needs to be protected and what needs to be released. Cancer by house, where you protect. So the house that contains Cancer in your chart is the area of life where you are most protective, most emotionally invested, and most likely to retreat where you feel threatened. It is where you build your sanctuary, where your roots grow deepest, and where you carry the strongest memories. If Cancer is in your 10th house, your career is a form of nurturing. If Cancer is in your 7th house, your partnerships are your emotional home. If Cancer is in your 4th house, its natural house, the entire life is organized around the creation of a safe, beautiful, memory-filled private world. Alright, on to myth and symbol. Beginning with Karkinos, the crab of Hera. In Greek mythology, the constellation Cancer is associated with Karkinos, the crab that Hera sent to distract Heracles during his battle with Hydra. So Karkinos was not a powerful creature, it was a small, persistent crab that nipped at Heracles' foot. Heracles crushed it, but Hera placed it in the stars as a reward for its loyalty. The myth is revealing Cancer's strength is not in direct confrontation, it is in persistence, in the willingness to fight, even when outmatched, in the loyalty that persists regardless of the odds. Crab sideways movement. Crab walks sideways, and this is perhaps the most precise physical metaphor for Cancer's approach to life. Cancer does not move directly toward what it wants, it circles, it approaches obliquely, it gets there, but not in a straight line. This is not evasion, it is strategy. The crab sideways movement allows it to keep its vulnerable front facing away from threats while still making progress. Cancer does the same thing emotionally. It advances toward what it needs while keeping the sensitive core protected. Alright, the Chariot, Cancer's tarot correspondence. In the Golden Dawn system of tarot correspondences, Cancer associated with the Chariot, chart of victory through mastery of opposing forces. The Chariot depicts a figure driving a chariot pulled by two sphinxes or two horses of different colors, often moving in different directions. The symbolism is precise. Cancer's task is to harness opposing emotional forces, the desire to protect and the need to release, the urge to retreat and the call to advance and to drive them forward together. This is not the Aries charge or the Capricorn climb. This is the mastery of the vehicle through understanding of the forces that pull it. Now let's go on to Cancer's compatibility, elemental harmony, and tension, beginning with, of course, water trine, Cancer, Scorpio, Pisces. So Cancer forms a trine with Scorpio and Pisces. The other water signs, these are the most natural connections, the relationships where emotional depth is shared and understood without explanation. With Scorpio, the connection is deep and transformative, two signs that understand the depth. Through Scorpio goes further into the dark than Cancer is comfortable with, and with Pisces, the connection is dreamy and oceanic, two signs that dissolve into each other, though the challenge is that neither may provide the structure the other needs. And Earth trine, Taurus, Virgo, Capricorn. Cancer forms a sextile with Taurus and Virgo. Supportive, complementary connections. Taurus provides the material stability that Cancer's emotional life needs, and Virgo provides the practical care that Cancer's nurturing instinct can become when channeled through service. So Capricorn is the opposite, the relationship of tension and completion, where each provides what the other lacks, but only through the friction of fundamentally different orientations. The squares, Aries and Libra. Squares to Aries and Libra are the growth edges. Aries teaches Cancer to act directly, to stop circling and start moving. And Cancer teaches Aries to consider the emotional cost of their actions. Libra teaches Cancer to socialize their care, to extend it beyond their private sphere. And Cancer teaches Libra that true harmony requires depth, not just balance. Alright, so Cancer is a sign of the beginning, not the beginning of action, but the beginning of feeling, the beginning of the understanding that the world is not just a place to act in, but a place to feel in, to care about, to protect, to remember. The theme of Mundi tells us that the cosmos itself begins in Cancer with the moon rising, the principle of nourishment and cycle and body as the first light of the world. If you carry Cancer strongly in your chart, whether it's the sun, moon, rising, or stellium, your work is not to become less sensitive. Your work is to build a shell that protects without isolating, to learn to open it by choice, and to trust that the vulnerability you guard is not a weakness, but the very thing that makes you powerful. The crab does not survive despite its softness. It survives because of its shell, the architecture that allows the softness to exist in a hard world. Cancer teaches that sensitivity is not weakness. It is a navigation system, and the ocean is not a place to drown. It is a place to dive. You better sink or swim. With peace and love. Here are the sources. I'll see you in the next video. Subscribe, like, comment, share if you don't care. Pisces out.